other buttons.
Okay. Well,
It's taking a minute.
well, you
Okay,
got thrown for a loop today. Sorry.
other buttons.
Okay. Well,
It's taking a minute. Are you with us?
yes. We are live on YouTube. Hello. I am Elektra and with me is Victoria McMahon. And we are collaborators on the program called CreateAWorld. And I know if you've been on it a number of times, you've met the other members. We are well, basically, let's see, we're friends, first of all, who enjoy talking with each other about what they found rising in the field. And then and we used to do that a lot. And then we said, wow, there are other people out here who are doing really interesting things. So we started talking to them. And now you see us talking to each other a lot again, simply because we're paying a great deal of attention to what's rising in the field. And you may go, well, what do you mean by what's rising in the field? And what gets our attention? What's different? How is our access and experience in the world different? And that's what Victoria and I are going to do today, is talk to you about loosening the mind. It doesn't give you a great picture. Your brain just goes all loosey. Two things. This is not showing on live. I just want you to know that.
Yeah,
So, it's not doing anything. Great. Well, welcome. Welcome to YouTube. Well, it will be on YouTube. This is CreateAWorld, and CreateAWorld has collaborators, about 6 of us. Today you're getting to be with me, Elektra and with Victoria McMahon. What is this? Why do we do this? Well, it started with us having lots of conversations about what was rising in the field, what was catching our attention, what was a different experience. And in addition to talking to ourselves, we decided we wanted to talk to other people and find out what the new and different ways that people were coming to being in the world and being more than they used to be. This is a conversation today with 2 collaborators. And what we have been talking about, and we named it called loosening the mind. And so that picture always puts in my mind something with, your brain and then all these little things come out. And that might not be too far from the truth, because one of the things we know about the brain is that it holds all the information that we've gotten in our lifetime. And it holds it in what's called neuroglial networks. And a lot of it is okay to always do. Some of those things, like brushing your teeth every morning, is a neural network that says this is what you do when you get up. And we have many different neural networks that are what I would call functional. You know how to cook, you know how to bake a cake, all these different things. And there's some that may be problematic for you or me or Victoria if we continue to follow them without in these changing times. I'm trying to think of one, but right now I can't. So there's lots of belief systems that we get from our families and our religions that are in these neural networks. And when we were young, we were told this is the truth. This is the way it is. And now as an adult, and we're going like, I don't think this is exactly true, is when you start the process of loosening your mind, opening yourself up to allowing that maybe something else may be real, not what you learned when you were young. And that's what we think is a very critical skill at this point, to observe, to allow that something may be different, and then a lot of times getting a different experience. So accepting that there's another reality in whatever that situation is. That's my beginning. What do you think? Well, how would you define it, Victoria?
It's good to be with you, Elektra. I was thinking about our discussion in preparation for this, and it came to me that there's like three prongs, if you will, of how I might notice if I'm in an exploration of loosening the mind. And you spoke to the beginning of it. The first one that I always pay attention to is the physical mind itself, and how the brain actually builds neural networks, whether they are efficient and effective, or whether those neural networks may be building belief structures that don't necessarily support us, but are habitual patterns. Habitual brushing the teeth is in support of our physical health, and other habitual mind patterns may hold us back in some ways, or stop us from engaging in new processes. And so I was thinking about that, and you said the physical, and I was like, yeah. And then then you went into the beliefs, and I was thinking about not only the beliefs, but the emotion that gets connected in with those beliefs, and how those thinking patterns can trigger emotional responses that may support us in exhilaration, in passion and excitement, or may shut us down and we feel overwhelmed or upset. And they may or may not move us towards a loosening of the mind and an awakening or opening up into something new. Sometimes they're what we call the catharsis, and it really does open us up. And sometimes it just kind of tamps us down even more. And then that spirit part of us, that how are we engaged in our own inner consciousness awakening? The other day you were saying the phrase threading our inner consciousness. And for me, that threading word was definitely a part of a feeling of loosening our mind and being more open to. And a friend of mine had shared pretty recently how if you'd met him a number of years ago, you would have seen a different version of him. You would have interacted with him differently, because he started a journey spiritually in opening his mind to the possibility that the unseen world is interesting, and he wanted to be in relationship with it. And I looked at that moment of his sharing that, and I said, that's an example. That's evidence of how he was loosening the mind in a spiritual context. So I like that. I definitely thrive on physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual components, and how we might have that conversation today, the ways in which we experience ourselves loosening and expanding into. So that's what popped in for me. What go. What's up?
Well, I was one of the things, I don't know if you remember the song from South Pacific, the movie, You Have to Be Carefully Taught, was the name of the song. And the song really talked about you've got to be carefully taught to be very suspicious of people who are different than you. And it was written by a guy who had fallen in love with a young Asian woman while he was in the South Pacific. And his belief system about Asian women or about Asians stopped him from following through on that relationship. And so he sang this wonderful song. And it was the first time that I've seen, at least in movies, for it to be say, hey, this is just stuff, our beliefs about other people or other races or all sorts of things like that are taught to us. And I've been thinking about that this morning, going like, how many generations past was that belief inserted? And how has it acted itself out through different generations? And when we stay in the same town with the same people, those beliefs seem true, right? So that's why you're going to get that's why you get people upset about things, because they said what you're trying to do, if you're going to do something other than what they believe, is wrong. And they will be violent to that end to protect what is right. So the question for all of us is, how do we know what was right? And one of the tools that we use in the Language of Consciousness Institute is paying attention to what we call our sentient registers. And your sentient registers are sensations, sensitivities, energy running through you, words that may pop in your head about what is life enhancing or life generating for you. And we usually, and most of the time, most people are not used to paying attention to their body, and what their body has to say is, hey, this is a good idea. Hey, this is a really bad idea that you're having right now. And through the Institute, most of the time, what we do is we write creation exercises. And in those creation exercises, you have to write what we'd call life-generating phrases. And I always tell people, pay attention to what your body's doing. What is telling you in your body? That sensation, that imagination, that is rising, that says, yeah, this is the phrase I want to use. Those sensations, sensitivities, imaginations are your sentient registers. They're your body talking to you about what is resonant for it, what's life generating. And sometimes it's not what you used to believe. So one of the wonderful, and I will always say to people, if you want a tool that's really going to help you kind of create more neural networks in your brain that are life enhancing, do the creation exercises.
So there's that physical aspect that you're speaking to.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'd love to thread it a little bit here if we can. I'm not sure. I'm kind of like, let's see what our brains can actually do. Can they loosen up in the moment? This notion of, okay, if I take on this writing the templates practice, and it creates a physical neuro networking that's new, how does that how does that thread this notion of what we're calling today loosening the mind? Like
Okay.
what comes up for you? And
Well,
I did find out we are live. Yeah,
we are. Oh,
we
great.
are live. So happy to have all of you guys with us.
Happy
We're
days
still
are here
learning our
again.
technical capacity to loosen our mind and know we're in the field with you. So, well,
Okay, so yeah, one of our people says they're watching live, so that's wonderful. Thank you. I'm glad you're all
thank
here.
you.
Well, let me tell you what I think happens.
Okay.
We know that the neural networks, a lot of them are set. You know, you come into life as all you have is a matrix of neural tubes that the glial cells have created, right? And as you go through life, all of that network is populated with information that you get. And we have, let's say that we have the, let's say, go back to brushing your teeth. That's what we call an ingrained neural network. It's got a very limited, get out of bed, go to the bathroom, brush your teeth. That's kind of limited. Maybe it has a few other things in there, but for every other, for all neural networks, if you loosen it up, if you give it more options, whether you give it options by doing your teeth differently, using vitamin C wash, something else you put in there, so you have a larger network. But I'll give you an example of a network that I didn't know was acting. My granddaughter, who's an 11-year-old, was talking to me, and she stated this fact about herself, and out of my mouth spouted, "No, you're not." Now, I try and nurture this child. I try and, do everything to increase her creativity, her self-confidence, all that stuff. But she told me something, and it's an engraved neural network when you have an automatic reaction. Okay. Sort of like if you fall and all of a sudden you're up here and then you're down there. Same. It's quick, it's instantaneous, and it isn't anything I thought about. Because of course, 2 seconds later, I'm going like, how can I tell her that? So when we're in a rigid neural network, you get reactions that are very quick, are not thought through. But that's kind of how the brain is set up so that you are protected. If it says you put your foot down onto the street and, you see a car coming very quickly, you move your foot back, and that's how the brain said, get your foot off the street. When we write creation exercises, so getting back to that, you end up giving that neural network at least 12 different life-enhancing phrases. So now the network that had maybe 5 now has 20. So then your system starts to have choice when you act. So in working with that for myself, I want to write a creation exercise on what that phrase was that she said, so that I can create more life-enhancing responses about that. And therefore, if she or even my other grandkids say anything like that, I'm not going to fall into the, no, you're not. I'm going to fall into, whoa, here is all the different choices that I have to respond to what she said. And so it's my impression is that people think that whatever they say is whatever pops in their mind is the truth, the actual truth, and not anything else but the truth. And that's just not true, because there's each of us has one, you've gotten a lot of information from your family, your church, your community, about what is real and what you should do. And everybody on this call has already listened to their family and their church and their community and going like, I don't think so. This isn't my world. I was expecting something different, or I want something different.
Mm.
And I am willing to do something about it, to search, to open myself up to deepen my relationship with that which when I was young, I didn't believe in. So an example might be when I was a little kid, I was raised in the Catholic Church. So spirituality was having to go to mass, but it was also, now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord my soul to keep.
Mhm.
So my only relationship with a God was that. And I usually, after having blessings, then I'd say, these are the things I want. So anybody who's probably on this call says, well, that isn't it. I experience God creation in nature when I go out. So now now your neural network has more options about what God or creation is for you. And it isn't limited to saying your prayers by your side of your bed or the kind of service or religion that your family had when you were little.
So one
And
of the things I hear you saying, Electra, in the different threads of the conversation that you just spoke, is this notion of when we make room or make space. And it brought me back to the moment when I was in yoga practice the other day. And I heard the words space into grace. And so there's this kind of threading in this moment that I'm listening to that says, if I loosening my mind is about making space, which we might call more options for how to see our reality, that you see it one way, and then the more you're able to pay attention, you loosen the mind and give space for grace, and that opens up new possibilities. And I wondered, because there may be some people listening to our conversation, kind of eavesdropping and going, I don't even know what creation exercises are. So I wondered if you'd be game, could we play with your loosening the mind of you're not that. How did you say it to your granddaughter? You said 3 words.
not that.
You're not that. Okay. Would you naturally gravitate? I have my own sensibility about it, but would you naturally gravitate to a template to loosen your mind around that phrase, that belief, to try and open up new possibilities? Would you start with an observing template or a craving template?
Well, normally if I'm trying to redefine a word, then that word would be, then I'd use a template 3.
Okay.
And the
So
template
one of
3
the
is
craving templates.
craving what that word, that phrase is for me is.
Okay.
But I think, but you're right in that one of the first steps, I think, in loosening your mind is to do an observing.
And that's what I was kind of like
That's
going,
actually the
I
first
would do the
thing.
observing of how I felt and how I'm feeling and saying that to my granddaughter as a way to get some more space so
Right,
that the grace in loosening the mind is the craving what are the other ways in which I could see and bring new phrases in. Does that make sense to you?
I think it's a wonderful thing. Actually, what we find out is that a lot of people write more observings and observing beings than they do of craving templates. And the reason for that is exactly what you said. It gets them out of the perspective or the loop that they're in and helps them kind of open up to, oh, because the way the phraseology works is observing. I'm appalled that I responded to my granddaughter that way, has me be present to, it really caught me off guard. Being present to, it really caught me off guard, has opened me up to, I think I'm not paying attention enough to what's really going on with her. And I haven't being opened up to, I haven't really been paying enough attention to what's going on with her. Has me have, I never want to hurt that child. And I will keep opening up to her to be more of a support for her.
Mm. And that's your craving what?
Yeah.
Craving what? Keeping opening up. Okay, craving what? Opening up into my granddaughter. You know what I mean? That you can create that neural network that holds the space of your mind that you would respond
Mhm.
that way of being with her.
Right. And one of the things I have noticed now is she is her own person. And so she doesn't, she has never chosen to walk the path of what little girls should wear or anything, you know.
I
We've
can
never
relate to
seen,
that.
let's say we've never seen pink frilly dresses on her. And I was watching her, and she does artwork that integrates all sorts of different pieces of fabric and color and everything. And she makes masks. And then then I watched her get ready for, she's in what does she do? Derby, that roller skating thing. And the outfit she wears. And I'm going like, oh my God, I had missed this totally. But it's all part of one package. The fact that she creates art that really brings all sorts of fabrics and colors and shapes into it. She dresses herself the same way. So if my mind was, well, you don't wear those colors together. I don't know. When I was her age, had to be very rigid. And I thought, isn't that the most amazing thing? Not only does she find it very comfortable to put all sorts of what you might call eclectic things together, and she's very comfortable in that to wear it, which I wouldn't have been at that age. She finds friends who dress the same way or who do the same art. And to me, I feel very proud of her. So
Can I just respond because I'm almost in tears of joy. What we just experienced together for me is what it is to loosen the mind.
yeah,
You went from one experience of your mind of she's not that to to letting an observing unfold in the moment, which is the physical, mental, emotional, spiritual connection to who you are in the moment with yourself about this experience. And the result of that brought you into, I want to hold my mind in relationship to her with love and joy and beauty and appreciation. And I'm just sitting here like I want to pop hearts across the screen because because I love, my heart sings when things happen in the moment. I am a spontaneous kind of, I want us to feel the experience of you right here live on YouTube, loosening the mind.
Mhm.
And how it seems like such an abstract notion that we're talking about doing. And here it is. It's like, oh, it's just the simplest thing, really. We really can just take the everyday moments and find that juice, find that passion for it, and see what happens from here to there. I know you, Elektra, you will go and write the Craving What template to begin to neural net and thread this into your life and bring more connection to from you to your granddaughter, and that will impact and ripple through her. And so I'm just like, champagne corks are popping in my body,
Me
and
too, me
I
too.
want people to appreciate how my word for 2025 is simplicity. So I am like totally like loving that we can experience in the moment what we wanted our conversation to be. And that's just like ecstasy for me in life. So thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
You're welcome. And it was in that when I made that connection between her artwork and her clothing, I was like, oh my God, this is her.
A
This
new
is,
neural network is
yeah,
forming.
it was like all of a sudden. And then I texted my son and said how amazing I thought his daughter was. And he said back, he said, yeah, she's awesome. So here we have the adults in her life saying she's awesome and seeing the beauty of the world she's creating. And so she's deliberately not doing what society would say, you know.
It's innate to her to be who she is.
Yeah. And if she was in another family, or would she have allowed to be flowered that way?
And if she didn't have a grandmother who practices threading her inner consciousness to say, "Oh, that's not the reality I want to create with her." And we thread it out a little bit in our conversation because that's who we are. The power of being with another is another piece of loosening the mind that we talked about the other day. And that we could do it here acknowledges for all of us that it is all these different moments in life that can thread our inner consciousness, which by that threading we get the loosening. So it's like a good sweater, it's threaded, but it also has this tensegrity kind of aspect to it. Expansion, contraction, holding form in the formless, the so above, the so below, dynamically happening in our lives. And so I'm just giddy.
Oh,
It's
I'm
like
glad you're
Tantra
giddy.
says, it's like Tantra says, I could just lick you all over right now. And I think about the people who may not know us, may not be familiar with CreateAWorld, going, oh, wow, that was pretty. Like there might be something to this. That was an everyday moment. I've had moments like this where I've paid attention in this way. Maybe they haven't done an observing template specifically, but what would it be like if I actually gave a conscious time and energy to creating this practice in my life? Would I get more of the joy of life?
And I would say, yes, you will. And so it's intentional. It's really very interesting because the mental mind can be very rigid, following logic that our society has put down as the truth. And when you start kind of loosening your mind and saying, there could be other ways to look at it, there could be other avenues, then all of a sudden there becomes a freedom for not just your mind, but also for your body, because the body will do what the mind says it is true. So I mean, there's this old story where the woman was told by one doctor that she would die, had cancer, nothing's going to help you, you're going to die. She started working with some other people, and 10, 15 years later, she's healthy, she's walking down the street, and that doctor passes her on the street, looks at her and says, "You're supposed to be dead." She died within a week.
Wow.
Okay. So one belief system or practice helped her live beyond the original diagnosis. The doctor who had the authority and that said that is the truth told her, "No, you're supposed to be dead." And so she died. And it wasn't a conscious one, but it was more of they know what's right. So I don't know what made her choose an alternative way and helped her survive. But we do know that there was something in her mind that said, if the doctor said you're supposed to be dead, then you're going to be dead. And the body followed. Now
And because I've been a yoga practitioner for decades, when I stretch the body, the mind gets loosened up too.
Yeah,
So
it's a back and forth. Yeah.
it's like we said in the beginning, there's a physical component to loosening the mind. There's a mental, emotional that we just experienced together. And there's a spiritual. And all three of those are coming about in the conversation today. I wonder if there's anything that we could dive in a little bit deeper on the spiritual or the spirit soul aspect of loosening the mind, if anything rises for you.
Well, one of the things I think I started with way back in my 30s was meditation. And just allowing that if I got quiet and really, I learned to sink into the earth. I learned to connect up to 7. I was using my sentient intelligence to tell me I was sinking in, to tell me I was lifting up and connecting. But that practice has started, well, I still do it 38 years later, yes. But that's often the beginning for people, is finding a way, whether it's really connecting to the earth while you walk out in nature. But that started it. And I've done Qigong, I've done different kind of Chinese medicine. I was a massage therapist. And in being a massage therapist, you can say, well, it's, yeah, you're working on the body, so it's just physical. But it's not. Because again, I had some sentient registers. I had some sensations that told me that I was in connection with spirit, with the etheric forces, with creation, whatever I wanted to name it. But I knew that an energy could come into me and through my hands and onto people. And so I had expanded from a good little Catholic high school, Catholic grade school kid, to someone who, I just know it. You can't tell me it doesn't exist. That was in a flow with the etheric forces. And sometimes I got names for those and sometimes I didn't. But it's a sentient piece. But the other thing is my clients would say, your hands are so hot. So it wasn't just me now seeing a difference in them. or sensing a difference in the client's body. It was my client saying, your hands are so hot. So that energy came through, and I think for all of us, it's just opening up to that maybe the earth isn't in reality, the society isn't the reality of earth is not what we thought it was. So I think it requires a little investigation, a willing to start meditating, a willing to study different ways of looking at the world, and trust. Trust is really important, I think, because trust that what we are receiving as either information or energy is real. Because you could also say, this isn't real, this is a piece of my imagination. And so it stops. It says, fine, if you don't want to be in connection with the greater forces or with your guides, or even with your dead grandmother, then you won't. It's really, we don't realize the strength of our own choice in this. You can choose. I could choose to hold the same beliefs that I had when I was in 8th grade in a Catholic school. Very limited world from my perspective now.
Yeah. And someone else may be completely embracing their religious context and be fully open up to other dimensional aspects of themselves. Everyone's different in how they work with what's before them. So
Right.
yeah, I love that. I think there's a loosening of the mind when we can find ourselves living beyond what's right and wrong, what's either or, what's good or bad, that's that we give that space and grace to ourselves, and we also find and hold that for each other, that we're all on the journey of finding that source within us that guides us and being in connection to it. And for me, I may be a little blind to it in some ways, and I'm trying to loosen my mind to see it more clearly. But for me, that source, that creation, that God is always there, whether I'm fully connected up or not. It's never not there for me. And so for me, loosening the mind is the recognition that I'm just uncovering to reveal that more capacity to be in remembrance, to feel fully vibrantly connected to all those possible realms that exist in me here now. So yeah, I think we're onto something there. And it always gets a little nebulous when we go into the spiritual aspect of our mind.
Yeah. But when you were talking, I got this feeling like a wiggle. And that's how I always feel like when I'm trying to open up spaces, I just wiggle in it, And it's sort of like when your body gets really tight or you feel confined, you do this physical wiggle. But that's what we're doing. We're saying maybe there's a different perspective. And if we think about a million people, millions upon millions of people, everybody has a different perspective. And I think that's when I read from about a different religion's belief system or their perspective, or I always kind of wiggle into it and say, does it work? Is that resonant for my system? Does that sound or feel like I could include that in this large field that I think reality actually is? And yeah, and it may not be a defining belief that I decide to take on, but it's there. And one of the principles of the field of Tantra Mod is everything has a place. Everything is part of everything else. Well, if you consider that there's a source being that created everything and creation is always around us, then yes, everything's part of everything else, whether we find it life generating for us or not. But I like, I always feel like I'm trying to make room for more.
And I think the other principle that is in the making room for more is that whether we mindfully recognize it or not, we're always moving to the next greater whole of ourselves.
Yes.
And if we look at someone else or something event that's happening and it doesn't seem like that's true, it still is. It still is. And how does that support us to make space for the grace in those moments? Like you made space and gave yourself the grace to be aware. That's not how I want to be with my granddaughter. That's not how I want to see her. What would it be like if we each took that on this year to make space for the grace to see each and every one of us, each and every event as in some way, known or unknown, we are moving towards the next greater whole of self, other, planet, cosmos. It seems like a really big idealistic gig, but I'm on for it. I'm on for it.
I think it's a great idea. It's that it's fun. Sometimes it's scary to look at something that you don't understand or that might shift how it might. You don't know how to shift world, but it's fun to do it eventually. You just go, whoa, I didn't know that. I didn't realize that that thought pattern I had over here was actually controlling behaviors. That's the thing that I've found in this last year is that yeah, I'm 77, so I've had a few years on the block here. And at one point, I believed that most of my childhood restrictions or limitations were gone because I've been working on it for 40 years, right? And what do I have? Well, what I'm experiencing now is there's more higher dimensional energies coming into this planet. And it's almost like it digs up anything that's still left that isn't, I haven't paid it, I haven't, I guess, paid attention to or recognized how it was in my life. So I think that's the other factor that's going on right now, Victoria, is because of these energies that are really coming in. I think our own spirit soul had came here for a purpose to be in this body, to have a certain thing to do. And I think that energy, the higher dimensional energies are coming in and it's discombobulating people because the stuff like me, I thought I had kind of cleared stuff. And then I said, oh, I began to notice that I had what I called automatic habits that actually were indicators that a lot of the restrictions that I had as a kid are still here. They were just showing themselves in different ways. But the joy of it is you get to really be with it and look at it and say, how can my life be different if I pay attention to this thing that was unknowingly restricting me? You go like, well, this is kind of cool. Because you go like,
And
I
how
don't
you're
feel that
moving,
way.
sorry, and how you're moving in your greater wholeness with your awareness, your inner consciousness alive and working on behalf with you and you with your own consciousness. And, it's interesting. I've started listening more to astrology in the past year. And yesterday it came to me through listening to someone I enjoy listening to. Tomorrow is a astrological speak, the conjunction of Venus and Neptune. And this person shared that is the connection of so above and so below at this moment in time.
Really?
And so you're talking about these greater etheric forces and energies coming in. And tomorrow is a really significant day, astrologically speaking, that notes it in the chart of the skies. So then it's like, okay, well, if we take a moment to just meditate on what it is for us to be connected so above, so below in our lives, in our own being, body, mind, spirit, what will we pay attention to, may have a little effect to loosen the mind and bring more possibilities of what's sacred to us, and what's our priorities, and how do we spend our time to kind of bring that into the moment and then let it carry us into the next days coming forward. So I think there's a little bit of magic happening in this moment through our just kind of let's chat about it and see what comes up. So I know we have about 6 minutes or so left
Yeah.
to kind of wrap things up. I don't know, is what's left that wants to be said?
If people would trust that it's going to be fun, it's going to be okay. If we say, well, wow, will my world be different if I allow that my thinking can control how I behave? Then if that's true, how can I behave differently to see if how that might affect my thinking? So I'm into being a wiggler. I must have been an awful wiggly little kid. And but it's like, okay, well, if I allow myself to think differently or do something differently, so I do, and then you go, well, how does that, oh, this was different than I thought it was going to be. So now you go like, oh, well, then my thought and my thinking about that is different. So when we try and expand and do differently, think differently, allow ourselves to be differently with someone, we're impacting the mind and the body. And I'd say play with it. It's not, have a good time with it. I was shocked when that incident with my granddaughter, it appalled me. And because it appalled me, I made changes. And then I started to discover my granddaughter.
Yeah.
Really discover her. And she's just a neat kid. But I think that's true for everything. If we just kind of go like, well, I usually would do this, but I'm not going to do that now. Oh, how does that change? And I guess the wiggle is it. Allow the doing, the thinking differently. Open up to a relationship with beings, with the earth, with nature. And look at the words of open up and allow. Because if you open up to and you allow it to be so, it will be so.
I have to share. You brought back a memory of me as a little kid. and I used to be called a wigglewort. And everybody thought that was like such a, God, could you just sit still? And I was always just kind of checking things out. And I'm like, no, I can't. I'm not. And now I'm going, I'm gonna wiggle today. I'm gonna see what it feels like in my wigglewortness. And so I'm like, I always embraced it. Well, I don't care if you like it or don't like it. That's your deal. Loosen your mind up a little bit. And I have some grace. My own mom, who's in her late 80s now, she's loosened her mind in some ways over the years of moving towards her greater wholeness. And I hold space for whatever more loosens up for her to have more joy in her life, and make room and space for that possibility. And at the same time, it's okay if it doesn't happen. And I think that's what you brought to me from the Wiggle Girl was, okay, she might have had too many boxes in her mind about certain things. And I see how some of those boxes have let go. And can we see that? Can we see that in each other, in our past, and we make space for grace?
I love that. Make space for grace. And
Yeah,
that alone allows grace in.
yeah,
I can feel it.
yeah.
And
Mm.
they're so powerful. Words are powerful. Language is powerful. And that's what Tantra's always been trying to speak to us about. Make space for grace. Ah, if you just use that every day, make space for grace.
Wow. It's been great chatting with you.
It really has, dear. And I'm so glad it actually
And,
went
and
alive.
I appreciate your willingness to go and do an observing in the moment.
Uh-huh.
And I invite anyone who listened in and said, "Oh, I want to know more about that." Get in touch with us. Uh, you can discover this beautiful um, template writing practice too. Get in touch with Elektra through the Language of Consciousness Institute, or let us know on the Facebook page that you'd like to know more, and we'll be happy to engage with you. And
Definitely.
have a beautiful rest of the day. Thanks for joining and being with us. And we look forward to seeing your comments on Facebook. Since our chat was not available to us today, we missed hearing what you had to say and look forward to